Mario Ranchi, brand strategist and founder of ManuFracture. Here today with another episode of Ambitions in an Agency. And today I'm going to talk to you about the elements of a strategy session. So before I get into things, just a few backgrounds. I landed a client last Wednesday about online tutoring for the education space, and we're going to be doing a strategy session today, basically to figure out how to communicate better his offer or his services basically. So I thought I'd make a video on how to do or just kind of the basic things you get to know about what a strategy session is about, and I think it's going to be very informative. So basically, a strategy session is where you want to go and find is just a normal conversation with a client, where you ask insightful questions to find insights. That's the simplest way you can define a strategy session. But I like to define those things into two terms, tangibles and intangibles. The tangible aspects are the things you actually have in hand. So basically, the tangibles would be your frameworks, right? Your frameworks being maybe these boxes, these canvases, all the stuff that you've kind of learned. It may be circles, right? But it's basically ways for you to collect information, right? A user profile is a framework. A brand elements sheet or a whatever sheet or positioning statement sheet is a framework. It's a way to collect information and to organize it in a way that your client can understand it from their point of view, and you can understand it from your point of view, which is incredibly important because you kind of both need to be on the same page as to what you're communicating and what info you're gathering, right? So those are the frameworks. And frameworks can be structured, always should be structured in a way to get to the insight, right? So if you have something that is like, you need to know what the users are doing, or you need to see maybe why users aren't trusting you as much or something like that, you need to start with the users. You never start with you first, right? But yet if you want to know where your company is going and maybe internally what's going wrong, then you start with the brand elements, right? So this is a way of kind of figuring out what the goal is and then rearranging your frameworks, your boxes, your canvases, your user profiles, whatever it may be, in a way that people really get. And I'm going to show you an example of what a framework might look like here. Aspect is your questions, right? Questions basically meaning, and this is I think the main meat of everything, right? If you don't have frameworks or you have no idea what frameworks are, you can easily get by just questions. And questions are the ones that, you kind of put to frameworks, right? Because frameworks are only ways to organize information, so you need questions to pull information out of your prospect, so you get more information from them and you get that information that matters, right? You cannot just do that by getting a framework and saying, yeah, so can you tell me more about your day-to-day struggles, right? That's like the worst thing you could do because it's not offering an insightful question. And as I've said before, in conversation, things come indirectly. The things that you say come indirectly. You need to kind of lead them down that path, of a conversation branch to get them to the place where you want them to say, the things or get the info that you need. So basically, what I do, I have a list of questions that I always take with me to a strategy session. you know. And over time, I'll probably like memorize these, but like I'm an intermediate at this, so I'm not really much of a beginner, but I'm an intermediate at strategy. I've done a few strategy sessions, so I just put these down because I need to remember these questions. These are the questions I need to ask to get an actual valuable info out of the client, right? And then organize it in such things. So that's a tangible. That's questions. And basically, I'm going to show you a clip of how I ask a question right here. I guess so. Their story. You already went into a bit about how they value education. I guess what happened in, again, going back since he's a current client of yours, what happened in the past that led him up to this point? I guess what were the first signs of him kind of thinking, okay, maybe we need a tutor, right? It's like the first time he's just like, did the kid bring home like an F or like, I don't know. I guess what is stopping them from solving this? The third thing is, for the tangible aspects, is the conversation. And you think, well, conversation, how's that tangible aspect? Well, it is, because overall you want a conversation that again leads you to the pains or the right info of the said user or the said company, whoever you're working with, whatever framework you're using. You want to get to that insight, those goals, that info that will lead you to the insight overall, right? The end goal. So you really need to look into the fact that, you know, the conversation just needs to be a conversation, right? I will talk about this in the intangibles part, but conversation, you need to have a flow of conversation, something that just goes on and on and on. It doesn't feel like a strategy session, right? If it feels like a strategy session, things will be way too structured, things will be way too pressured on the client won't really answer it honestly. You need him to answer honestly in this case, right? You need him to answer honestly. So think about conversation as something that's just a regular thing. Like you talk to a person, obviously you just need to talk to a client the same way. Have it become a conversation. And the only way you can do that is asking the right questions, leading in if you get stuck, and all this type of stuff. So conversation is another tool that you really need to master. So the fourth thing about the tangible aspects of strategy is clusters. And what are clustering or clusters? Clusters is when you start to prioritize information, right? After figuring out what info you want to prioritize information that might be of big importance. So you need to cluster, and clustering is basically the action of clustering 3 or 4 things together from sections from a strategy session. Like, let's say you're on the user profiles and you're on pains and you need to pick 3 pains. Okay, tell me what are the most important pains right now. 5 most important pains at the moment, right? 3, and then say, okay, then let's lower that to 3. How much 3 most important pains are at the moment? Okay, can we narrow that down to 1? Which is the most one important pain? Now, why am I doing this? Well, ultimately, clustering allows you to kind of first broaden the thing so the client doesn't get underwhelmed or overwhelmed, like having to pick one choice. You start clustering. Okay, what of these are most important? What of these are most important, right? And you make the circle smaller. What of this is most important, right? You make it easier for the client to choose what's most important to them for the strategy session to get an insight, right? You need to make sure that that's the case. Otherwise, you'll just pick a bunch of info, and again, it's not about just gathering info. That's only one part of strategy. The main part of strategy is to get an insight. Get an insight to help the brand or whatever, help communicate better with your customers or whatever, but get some sort of insight into, or an educated guess of what you're actually trying to get here. So in this case, what I'm going to show you here is the clustering. Yeah, there's a lot of stuff here. So yeah, pick 3 here that are good.
So the first bullet is he was afraid that the kid's not going to fail. be a failure in the real world's the second one, and not be prepared for things after high school would be another one.
Is that kind of similar to the real world? Oh, well, I guess not.
Sure, yeah. Then we can just put worried about the kid not going anywhere then. Or that would kind of be, all three of those are pretty similar.
Yeah. You see how they cluster together? Some of them have a similar thought pattern. That's what we really want. So those are the four tangibles of strategy. So the four things are first, frameworks, the things that you use to put the info in. Second is questions, where you use to get info from the client and then put it into the frameworks where you organize the information. Third is conversation, making sure that the thing is a conversation and structured as a very nice conversation. And five, the actual clustering of information and prioritizing it. Before we go on, one thing I forgot to mention within the tangible aspects is time. And time is important. Why? Because even though you want to keep this loose and conversational, you want to have a set limit because you want to keep the information or the information gathering process within a contained time period so that you can be able to go through this exercises effectively, right? So, I put at least 45 minutes on each framework, on each section. We go through each section. If you can't think of anything, we go on to the next one, and then we fill it in later. So that helps with saying, oh, you're not stuck here, but we have a time limit and we need to go through different things. So time is also an incredibly important thing. And all you can do really is just take your iPhone or whatever you have, a timer of some sort, and just put 3 minutes for each section. You put the timer, and then when it rings, you go on to the next one. When it rings, you go on to the next one. When it rings, it goes on to the next one. Therefore, you're keeping time, and then you can leave a buffer at the end. So let's say you spend 3 minutes on each section. You have 6 sections. You have 18. You spent 18 minutes on one user profile, and then another one 18 minutes. Anything you've left off, you have enough time now to cover. To go into it till later, 2 to 3 minutes, whatever, right? So you have a buffer time of at least 4 minutes or so. So that's good. Yeah. So those are the tangibles. Now the intangibles. What is an intangible of strategy sessions? Intangibles are the things you can't see but are also equally important. Again, strategy sessions are not mechanical. Someone who's just getting to strategy thinks that strategy sessions are just this case, are this this strategic structured thing that goes in order. Yes, there is some structure to it, but the fact is, since human beings aren't structured, all our processes have to be flexible to a human nature's needs, and that is where the intangible parts of strategy come in. And the intangibles are flow, vibe, and body language. Those are the 3 things. And why are these so important? Again, they're to create a human aspect to the strategy session, and it is to also enable. And when you have all these good things happening, these 3 things happening in the intangibles, you will also have a good strategy session because the person will open up more. So let's go for the first one, flow. What is flow? Flow is basically this state of, just nothing of non-effort. Things are just moving in a good fashion, and everything is going, well, so to say, right? And everything is doing fine, everything is doing great, and you're flowing, and you're doing this, and you're going well. That's the whole thing, right? It's just the feeling that everything is going as expected, as planned, going in a nice flowing motion. Nothing is static, right? And sometimes the problem is sometimes things will disrupt the flow, right? Client asks questions, they're stuck on something. I always say, talk through it, right? Give me whatever you've got at the moment. Tell me what's on your mind, what you're thinking, right? Because I don't need you to be right at the moment. I just need you to just say info, and we'll see what happens, and we'll filter that info later, right? And that can keep the flow going, because if you stop the flow and you're like, yeah, I'm stuck on this question too, being stuck creates a negative effect on the strategy session, because you're just stuck there and you're stuck on this one thing and you can't move anywhere. Like, oh, what do I do? I was supposed to go in this order and I was supposed to do these things, and now what happened, right? But you have to be okay with that, because that's unpredictability, that's human nature. So good flow is so important to strategy sessions. Vibe is emotional vibe. It's the vibe you're getting from your client and from you. You need to keep the vibe of this thing, the emotions of this thing high all the time. So positive, 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 right? Sometimes you can be negative, sometimes, but I wouldn't recommend it. But negative vibes have to be for a reason. Like, why are you thinking that way? Give me more reasons about that, right? Let them do more of an introspection for themselves, right? But you have to keep it always with the intention of being positive. The intention of being positive is so critically important, and you need to do that, very, very well. This is better used in person, but you can also use it when you're online. Body language is so important, because body language shows and conveys emotion. Right now I'm doing this, moving my arms around, looking at you in the camera directly, all this type of stuff. You're getting some sort of, emotions from me, an emotional charge. This contributes to the vibe of what I'm presenting to you today, right? Informative, educational, etc. You need to do the same thing in a strategy session. Same exact thing, even if you're offline, people can still hear body language through the phone or through the Zoom, or if you're in a Zoom thing, right, and you're just going through here and you're looking here and you're looking here while you're putting down the notes on your computer. I mean, yeah, great, but at the same time you want to look at the client when he's looking at you and doing all that stuff. Just making sure you're doing basic body language and stuff like that. That also helps the client trust you more and open up more, right? And those are the main things you need to do with the intangibles. The intangibles of a strategy session help with opening up the client more, right? You need him to open up to you so you can get the best info out of you. Because he's a gold mine of information, but you kind of have to open it the right way so people but I hope you got some value out of today. If you liked it, subscribe, turn on notifications, and I will see you on the next one. See ya. Bye.